Hi, I'm Mark, and today I want to talk about the failure of the government on their migration promises. Yes, more Brexit promises broken. The Conservative government is once again breaking its post Brexit promise to let fewer people into the country. A migration policy dispute is raging in the Conservative Party now. Prime Minister Sunak is now making it more difficult for students as well to join families without causing too much economic damage. I talked about this on my magazine channel already. But long before the statistics were published, immigration was at the heart of British politics, with net immigration hitting a new record of more than 700,000 people. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is desperate to counteract the impression that he has lost control of the borders. The Conservative ruling party has promised less immigration again and again and broken all promises. That was kind of a sneer by Labour opposition leader Keir Starmer. The Statistics Office ONS officially published the annual figures on Thursday. Take back control, the desire for more control over one's own borders. That was one of the most important slogans of the Brexit supporters. In fact, according to an estimate, a good 600,000 more people immigrated to Great Britain in 2022 than left the country, according to the Statistics Office ONS. That was 118,000 more than in 2021. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had promised to reduce immigration to less than 250,000 people a year overall. The new data confirms that the number of immigrant EU citizens has been fallen steadily since Brexit, while the number of non-EU citizens has risen enormously. This is mainly because people from the EU will need a visa to live and work in the UK since 2021. In 2022, 151,000 EU citizens moved to the country, which was 13% of all newcomers, and 45,000 fewer than in 21. In 2018, they accounted for more than half, with 52%. On the other hand, 925,000 non-EU citizens came. This was also due to the large number of refugees, 200,000 from Ukraine and 150,000 from Hong Kong. The proportion of vulnerable migrants in the total increased from 9 to 19%. But above all, it is a consequence of Brexit. Without the now missing EU citizens, the shortage of skilled workers has become even more obvious. In gastronomy, for example, there were many southern Europeans from Italy, Spain, and Portugal in the past. Eastern Europeans from Romania and Bulgaria worked in meat processing and agriculture, Poles in nursing and in hospitals. They have left gaps that the British are unwilling or unable to fill, and therefore hundreds of thousands were brought into the country from other parts of the world. Migration researcher Madeleine Sumption from the University of Oxford cites the introduction of long-term work visas for carers as an example. The largest groups come from Nigeria, India, and Ghana. The industry is dependent on forces from poorer countries. That's the criticism from experts. But the Brexiteers must like this. At the same time, the list of industries that are exempt from the strict visa rules is constantly growing. Fishermen have only recently been added. The promise that Brexit would help local fisheries has not been fulfilled. Since then, there have been obstacles to EU trade in fresh products. Brexit hardliners, on the other hand, are calling for British people to fill vacancies. 2.5 million people are on long-term sick leave. Many disabled people who want to work cannot find work, is what Tory MP John Hayes told BBC Radio 4. As long as they could get cheaper foreign workers, they won't. But the high-wage, high-skill economy promised by ex-Prime Minister Johnson, that's an economy with well-paid and highly qualified workers, is still not in sight. For the Conservatives, the issue is highly explosive. After the financial crash and economic crisis of 2008, the issue of immigration rocketed up the population's list of priorities. Tory Prime Minister David Cameron therefore promised to reduce net immigration. That means newcomers minus emigrants, to below 100,000 per year. The fact that this was not even remotely successful contributed to the tight Brexit decision in 2016. Populists had suggested that EU freedom of movement would bring millions of Turks to the land. Yeah, Mr. Farage. The UK has regained autonomy over its own borders. Brexiteers like to say as a success, in contrast with the constantly increasing number of immigrants, that weighs all the more heavily now. And Sunak and his nationalist Interior Minister Suella Braverman, both of immigrant descent, made a name for themselves with their restrictive asylum policy. This is aimed at tens of thousands of mostly young men who came across the English Channel in small rubber boats. In asylum procedures, that usually last for years, more than 2/3 of the migrants from Afghanistan, Sudan, or Syria are recognized, though. The Tories want to put a stop to this. Anyone who comes illegally should be deported to Rwanda without a trial. The appellate court would decide in June whether this is legal. A new asylum law is also currently being discussed in the upper house. It should give ministers the opportunity to ignore complaints at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which would break international law. The opposition is led by the Anglican Archbishop. Justin Welby believes Braverman's asylum policy is morally unacceptable and practically unworkable. We will not abandon those who are particularly vulnerable. After all, Jesus Christ expressly gave us the task of loving them, he said. Home Secretary Braverman wants a culture war of a very different kind. The figurehead of the extreme right wing of the party regularly invokes the will of the people and declares war on left-wing asylum lawyers and the politically correct civil service. Immigration endangers the national character, she believes. The Conservative panic is largely due to poor poll numbers, with the Tories trailing the Labour opposition by up to 20%. Party leader Keir Starmer surprised friend and foe alike on Wednesday with a concrete announcement. If his party wins the general election that is due within 18 months, he will improve the educational opportunities for the local population. The abolition of the previously applicable rule according to which employers may pay foreigners 20% less wages should also contribute to this. The corresponding list of skilled workers not only includes seasonal workers in agriculture, but also craftsmen such as roofers, bricklayers, and tilers. Paying them less money than British workers is unfair and leads to wage dumping, as Starmer argued in the House of Commons. It's the same here, by the way. It's not allowed. The government's latest measure, on the other hand, severely restricts the right of foreign students to bring family members into the country. This was previously forbidden to undergraduate students. From January, the ban will also apply to master's graduates. Only doctoral students and postgraduates remain exempt. Actually, Brexit was supposed to dramatically curb immigration to Great Britain. But now the number of migrants is higher than ever, and this is due to the abundance of job offers and the lack of trained British workforce. And Britain has two basic problems. At one, its job market is extremely attractive for job seekers from all over the world. Vacancies become. It acts like a magnet for more and more migration. And at two, there are not enough trained British workers for the multitude of positions in the industrial and medium-sized sectors. And therefore, the companies like to get cheap labor from outside the island, which does not exactly encourage the motivation to train local workers. So Starmer is right in that point. You have to know this context when you study the latest figures for immigration to Great Britain. And as I said in the beginning of the video, the authorities registered 606,000 net immigration for the last year, which is the highest number so far and about the same as we all expected. So the country is growing every year by about the population of a city like Sheffield. And the consequences are visible everywhere. There's a lack of living space, schools are bursting at the seams, and the health service is still overwhelmed. Two factors also favor this development: the humanitarian openness to refugees from Ukraine and the influx from the former Crown colony of Hong Kong. I told you the numbers before, where freedom is facing increasing repression by the Chinese authorities. Many Hong Kong Chinese who have the right to move to the former mother country evade this. And for the first time, asylum seekers are also included in the statistics. 172,022. But the number of permits granted in 1 year is far behind the ever-increasing backlog of applicants, so that the call for radical solutions is growing, such as the deportation of those who have arrived illegally to Rwanda. And the government is embarrassed by these developments. When the Tories first came to power in 2010, and I said Cameron pledged to reduce immigration and to 100,000 a year. At that time, it was still said that Brexit would dramatically curb the flow of migrants. It's now known that this was a wrong calculation. Even before Brexit, immigration peaked towards non-European countries, and that really came through today. And Prime Minister Rishi Sunak can hardly turn this picture into a positive one until the next election. And as I said, this must take place in January 2025 at the latest. Whether Labour could do so is questionable, though. Who has the magic wand that could put the island out of its misery here? If Boris Johnson were still Prime Minister, one might expect an original statement blaming the EU for more people arriving illegally in the UK in 2022 than ever before, of course. Johnson's successor Rishi Sunak only states that the numbers are too high. Another full-bodied promise by the Brexit ideologues has thus vanished into thin air. They had claimed that only by leaving the EU could Great Britain regain control of its borders and thus of the extent of migration. Measured against this, one would now have to speak of a loss of control, for which London itself is responsible. But Sunak doesn't want to see it that way. Ever since they took power in 2010, the governments supported by the conservative governments have promised to limit immigration. The differences between immigrants and emigrants should not exceed 100,000. And last year, the corresponding figure was a good 600,000. And according to official information, this is a further increase compared to the previous year. And the solution that the government is offering is legally and morally controversial and definitely is against international law. But even if this construct holds up in British courts, it's likely just another illusion the government is using to show its strength. And I put Nigel Farage on purpose on the thumbnail of this video because he recently complained about this. But even Nigel Farage must have known at the time when he was campaigning for it that this is just one thing, a blatant lie, that leaving the EU would help them reduce migration by far. And they all knew it. If they didn't know at that time, they are either suffering from a lack of education on their elite schools or they're just dumb. Everybody that knows international law knows that the membership of the EU had to do with EU migration, yes, but it didn't change the number of people they need in agriculture and so on, and in gastronomy. There are, of course, still a lot of people in Britain, not a major number, but still a lot of people that could work in these places. But to be honest, it's the same like here in Germany. We have asparagus season again soon, or it already started. And no German wants to work in these agriculture areas. This is really hard work. And even if they have to be paid the same as Germans when they come here to do the jobs, the guys from Eastern Europe that are working on the fields here in asparagus season, they are really tough because that is really tough work. And but that's the difference. They get, if a German is on the field, he gets the same pay as the people that are coming here from Eastern Europe, from the EU, to work here. We have equal pay there because we have laws on that, and they get the minimum wage, but the minimum wage is not so bad here in Germany compared to what they would earn at home. And a German would get the same, but that's the point. And there, I must say, Starmer has one little thing he can work on to give some incentive to companies to maybe train people from the UK itself. but the government is once and for all the first that's responsible here for the whole thing. And for the bigger picture whole thing trouble, Farage, Johnson, Gove, and many others are responsible for the situation the UK is in nowadays. And that the people fell for this populist crap. Talking about populist crap, sorry, Ellie, but there are some recurring whataboutism trolls, and I released them from prison some time ago to see if they found some better behavior. But I've blocked several of them again now because I'm really fed up of this. So you still have some to play, but these recurring whataboutists, they are gone. They can write their hell off, but nobody will see it. And maybe I will release them again someday. They were blocked 5 times already or something, and I always have a look if they behave better, but they don't. And so you will have some others to play, but not those anymore. But still, I appreciate every kind of proper discussion. But first of all, this is my channel on the UK. And so I bring topics of the UK, be it my morning Brexit and current politics videos, my midday devolution videos, or my evening history videos. It will all be about the UK. And in the British history videos, I, of course, as I did yesterday or today, I'm not sure again, because I filmed the history videos together, because I prepare those together because it's one workflow, so to speak. Of course, I talked about a little bit of German colonization because the British took over from Germany after World War One. But that's all I would mention from another country there in regard to British history. But I will not make any videos on German history on this channel. And so in the comments, it doesn't matter what Germany did when we're talking about British history. For that, I have different channels. I talk a lot about mess that's going on in Germany, but on a channel where it belongs. And the same goes with other countries. And so comments that are unrelated to the video will be deleted, period. You can have a proper discussion with different opinions on the topic of the video. But if you're just trying to spread populist nonsense, or if people are trying to distract from the real topic by going somewhere completely different, I just delete that nonsense. That is just a troll tactic I know since I started this channel. And the people want to have a proper discussion about the topic of the video and nothing else. And I help my reasonable viewers that are behaving like reasonable viewers to have a proper discussion. You can have completely different opinions, but be civilized and don't use populist tactics. I'm really allergic against that, and you will be gone quicker than you can think. But I thank all my reasonable viewers from both sides of the argument for a lot of good discussions I see in the comments. And that is what we need, proper discussions with, well, trying to bring facts at least, and not fake news on purpose. The fake news on purpose are gone. The ones that are trying to have a proper discussion, even if they are wrong, okay, they might be wrong in some places, but that is a proper discussion, and that is something wonderful, because that is what we need, and that is what we need much more nowadays, to have a proper discussion on opinions and not on populist nonsense and whataboutism. And that is why I'm making all these videos, to bring a wider view, because I'm not sitting in the UK, but I do know a little bit about the UK, as you can say now, after watching all my videos, and especially over the years. And that is also why I started the history videos, and those whataboutist trolls are very angry about the history videos at the moment, because I'm talking about the colonization of single countries by the British Empire at the moment. And that has a very good reason, and I will continue to do so. This series will go over to a different kind of British history when I'm through with all the countries affected. Because all my friends from the UK, if they live in the UK nowadays or not, are telling me that this was not part of their history classes in school. And I mentioned that before. We in Germany get bombarded in history classes with the Nazi era and everything. And that is important. Of course, it's boring at some point and you get annoyed at some point, but it's important. You need to know the history of your country and the full history, and not just some chosen parts of it. As I always hear from the same guys with the great victors of World War II. Whenever I say something about current politics they don't like, they bring up World War II. Well, I haven't lived there. I don't care. So that is why it's important to know this history. I also, while researching for the history videos, of course, I even do learn something myself. I didn't study British history, but I'm doing my research. And that is why it's important. And I see that, as I expected, not as many viewers as in the morning video, but I see that a lot of people appreciate the work I'm putting in there. And I hope that more and more, especially younger people, would watch these videos to know more about history, because history is important for our behavior for the future. And now it's enough of my preaching today. I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.